So you've received your kit materials for the Shibori ribbon necklace, and you've received some silk cording, a pack of beads. You've received a end cap, which is a glue-in type of magnetic end cap like this, and you received your ribbon. So whatever ribbon color you picked. I'm going to do a little sample here and show you how this gets started. What you really need to add is some thread. I'm currently using this Whisper thread, which is a smoke colored nylon. You can use any kind of nylon thread that you have. You can even use something like 1G if you have it around, which is a beading thread, or any sort of this is another type of beading thread that I have. It doesn't even have a name on it. But we're going to start by just stitching the length of the ribbon into a tube. And I'm using a number 9 milliner's needle. I just like this length and size needle. So I've got the thread, which is very difficult to see in this video, but you know, it's double threaded here. So we're going to get started with that. To begin with, I'm going to take the ribbon and putting the right sides together, I'm just going to start stitching down the length of this. And these need to be fairly small stitches because you want it to disappear. You don't want to have big gaping holes in your seam. So I just kind of rock my needle back and forth and gently tease the pleats open as I go. So after I have an inch or as many stitches as I can fit onto my needle, I'm going to just pull the needle through, pull the thread up, and pull out any gathers that I may have. One thing that I've learned to do as I've made a bunch of these is every so often I'll take a back stitch. So that way I am not pulling up gathers in the previous section. And I can just keep going on. Also, if for some reason I lose my thread, it's kind of a guarantee that I'm not going to just lose the whole line of stitching. So the thing to always remember is you want to make sure that you're getting both edges of the silk as you stitch up the length of this. So other than that, this part is really very simple, and it's just a sort of meditative rocking of the needle as you go and pulling up the thread. Again, I'm going to pull out any gathers before I carry on, and I'll do another little back stitch. So this is what you're doing at this point. You'll go the entire length and then we'll turn this. Okay, very simple. Now I have the whole length of this stitched, and I've come to the end and I've taken several tiny stitches in the same place to secure the end of the thread, and I'll cut the thread at this point. So here we are. So now I'm ready to turn this. You might have a turning tool that you like to use. I do have a couple, but I'm going to do this without one just so you can see how you can do this even without it. So I just flip the edge, and I'm sticking my thumb down in there, and or my finger, and I'm just pulling it over the outside and just keeping this going here until I get the whole thing turned inside out. So I'm almost at the end here. There we go. So now we have a yard of cording, stitched cording here. And now I'm going to insert the interior cord. Okay. I do happen to have one of those nifty little tools with a hook on the end, but like I said, you could actually just use a safety pin and feed it through your cording. So I've got that hooked on there, and I'm just going to insert this into the cord, feed the plain silk cord into that. And now that I have it all the way through here, I'm going to remove my tool and just hold on to one end. And now I have this whole cording now, which has a piece of this silk cording on the interior. It's really pretty, just like this, actually. I love the way this looks. So I'm just deciding what needle I'm going to use here, and I'm going to switch to a beading needle because it's a bit finer, and some of the small beads that I have don't want to fit over the eye of this milliner's needle. So I'm going to switch it out to a beading needle. So I've switched over to a beading needle, and I just went and checked all the smallest beads that I'm going to use on here, and they go right off the end. So that'll be just fine. Also, I'm going to be working on top of a little bead mat because I don't want the beads to roll all over the place, and it's easier to pick beads up off of a little mat like this. So move that needle out of the way. I'm going to thread up and I'm going to get started. So I'm going to start by securing this end, and what I'm going to do to begin with is I'm going to just catch the top of these pleats around the end of this ribbon and cinch it up. This is the end that I'm going to glue into the end cap. So I want it to be tight and small enough to get in there. I'm also going to take the needle and I'm going to go through that silk center cord back and forth several times. Okay, and that's just to connect and attach this piece here. Okay, now what I'll do even at this point is I'm going to take this thread and I'm going to wrap it around this end quite tightly because I want to get a good end here that I can stitch from, and then also when I'm done I can glue this into that end cap. Okay, so it's really a good idea to do this right now. You could always go back and do it later, but I just always have done it this way. So I'm going to wrap down maybe 1/4 of an inch or so, like so, and secure that with a couple of stitches going back and forth in each direction across the piece. And then I'm going to just trim that extra bit of cording that's coming out of there. Okay, so there's that. I'm just going to trim this little extra bit of cording off. There we go. And I want to make sure I don't trim the threads at all because I don't want that coming undone. If it were to happen, I could rewrap that in the end, but I'll just take one of my little end caps right now and I'm just going to check this, like, Okay, that looks pretty good. So it looks really finished in the end. So now on to the beading. This beading part is where you can really get creative. Now what you're going to be doing is this other end with the loose silk. You're going to be able to pull this up and kind of ruche up your silk as desired. And this part is completely on you. So I've loaded the 5 or 6 beads. I've gone back down through the ribbon, through the interior cording and out the other side. And now I will load up another 5 or 6 beads and different shapes and sizes and colors. It's pretty random. I like to make it as random as possible, actually. So the one thing to think about is when you have your beads loaded like this, you want, wherever you go in, you want it to be the distance of the beads that you have on your needle, okay? So I just kind of eyeball that, and as you do this, you'll get better at judging that. But then you're just going to, again, go in and come up in some other area. You can go back up a little bit if you want. I'm going backwards a little bit. And pull your beads into place. Okay. So I've got beads coming out there and there. And as you go, you can move the ribbon up along that interior cord to ruche it up a bit. Okay, and that's what gives it an interesting texture and shape and a lot more interest, in my opinion. I'm going to get an orange one on there. Okay, so here we are. I'm gonna make it come down and out the other side. Maybe I'll make it come right about there. I like to come up in between pleats. I just think the beads settle nicely that way. Okay. So now I'm on the other side again. And you're gonna just do this for this entire length. Stitching the seam to make the cord is very quick, but this is the part that takes the time, is loading the beads on and then stitching them into place. Okay. So you're just nestling the beads along the way. Every now and then, I think it's a good idea, just like we did on the seaming along the edge, is to take a couple of stitches through to anchor the piece invisibly in between pleats, just to get an anchored almost knot in there. And you know, in case something was to happen with some of your thread, if you lost your thread or you broke it, or you know, you wouldn't have to go all the way back. You can go back to a solid point in your piece. Okay, so as you do this, you can kind of create some interesting shapes as you go and just use your imagination. And I'm just going to keep at this, and I'll get to a certain point and I'll come back and show you what it's looking like. All right, so I'm back here just to give you a little progress update, and I've gotten about, maybe a little over a third of the way through this. And you can see as I turn this around that I've just kind of gone back and forth with the beads and in and out. And if you want to needle sculpt it in certain places, you can do that down in the valleys of the pleats, and just to create a shape that you like without even putting a bead on. And every now and then I do that. But here you go. You can kind of see the progress. And Good morning. I'm back at this piece again, and I'm about 2/3 of the way through now. And I will stop and tell you that, of course, you can decide how long you want your piece to be. You have a yard of ribbon, which once you have ruched it up and beaded it, it'll end up being closer to probably 30 inches. Leaving enough room for you to do a loose knot like was shown in the photograph. Just so happened I was going through some stuff on my desk here, and I came across this other piece, which is another colorway. I think this was the Midnight Borealis, or Navy Blue Borealis is what it was. So here's just a loose knot that becomes the focal piece of the ribbon. Now, with this piece being 2/3 of the way done, I can stop and think about how long do I want this piece to be. Now, if I want it to be the same as this one here, let me just quickly measure this one here on my table. So this here is 24 inches before it's knotted. So that's kind of the typical length that I make these is 24 inches. So it's probably about you'll have a little extra in your piece. So you can either bead that extra, make it longer, or stop it at about 24 to 26 inches. Have room for either a longer necklace or the knotted piece. Again, I can ruche this down onto the interior cord and decide where I want this beading to come out. Pull that up. Now I can pull this and ruche that a little bit. And if I want to hold that ruching in place, I might just take a small securing stitch in the exact little spot where I come out of this and come up nearby in order to throw some beads in that spot. So that'll kind of hold this in place while I decide. And it's completely invisible on this side. You can see, I don't know if you can tell, I just took a little tiny bite of the silk there. Yeah, this is getting close to finishing now. I love how the ribbon pleats twist and turn and make lovely little shapes as I go, shapes and swirls as I go down the length of this piece. And I'm loving this colorway actually. So I finished the piece to about 25 inches here, and I have gathered around the end and stitched back and forth just like I did at the beginning and cut it off, and I'm ready for the glue-in portion. So as you can see, they're both about the same length, and you can use either 527 jewelry cement, or you could even use a good hot glue. Hot glue will set up more quickly, but either way, the whole idea is to not get any glue visibly showing on the end or around the edge of your piece. So I would generally put a little bit of glue down inside, enough that when I push this in, it'll kind of squish up around it, but yet not so much as it'll come and show around the edges. And I'll put a little bit maybe down at the base of that, but you're going to insert that carefully. Now on my beginning piece, I see I got a little too close with my beads, so I'm going to have to go ahead and stuff the beads in there a little bit. As long as the glue doesn't come up beyond the edge, it's just fine. So you'll put the glue inside and squish in the pieces. Now, if you're using something like 527 glue, that's going to take a little bit longer to set up. I would recommend putting a pin down into something below. Right now I just have the beading pad, but or the bead mat, but I would probably get a little foam core board piece and stick it there, and then I can really pin that down and let it sit like that while it's setting up. That way it's not going to move. Glue's not going to be coming out, and if I try to reposition it while the glue is setting up. So I'll just leave that until the glue is good and set up. And when I'm done, I'm gonna come and I'll try and pull these ends out, because you want it to be really good and tight, because since this is a magnetic clasp, the way you're going to break this part is pulling it. So you don't want this cording to actually pull out of the end cap, and then you won't be able to wear it until you re-glue it. But if it does come out, then redo the glue process, and make sure it's good and secure inside that end cap there. That's pretty much it. And I'll take some photos of this to post in with my light box and everything. So I hope you enjoy making these. They're really this much left of it, so I'll use this for something. I actually have done some flowers where I use cording like this, and then I make a series of little loops for a floral piece. Another way to do this is actually, you can, if you turn this back inside out, and then I have a flower that I make with a cording like this, and then I'll just turn the end of it over like so, and then you can stitch along this base here, and you can put a stone in the middle, or you can do some little millinery stamens. You can do a little cluster of these flowers here. I think I have a piece somewhere nearby here. See if I can find it while I'm doing the video here. Oh, here it is. Got lots of little bits and pieces around here. So here's a little cluster. I had a piece of leftover cording from something I made, and so I stitched them all together here, and I was just interviewing some other little leaves and so forth for maybe a little corsage piece. But we've said this for a very long time. Every inch is an adventure with this ribbon, and there's almost no piece that's too small to make some use of. So save all your scraps and dig into them every now and then when you're making something. I'm sure you'll find a use for them.